He's running an illegal garage party. Arrest him now!
Veronica Hartwell, our tyrannical HOA president, shrieked at 7 cops she'd called, her face purple with rage as squad cars surrounded my garage with lights flashing. All because my band, Second Voltage, was quietly practicing Sweet Caroline for this weekend's charity event benefiting the food bank. We weren't even as loud as her 7 a.m. Sunday leaf blower that wakes the whole neighborhood. For 2 years, she'd terrorized everyone, fining kids for basketball, threatening families over paint colors, measuring grass with rulers, all while ignoring her own violations. There she stood in her pristine white outfit, phone recording, smirking like she'd finally won. Danny's drumsticks froze mid-beat. Sophia's bass fell silent. The garage went dead quiet. She had no idea that in exactly 10 minutes when she met the entire precinct, they wouldn't be there to arrest me. And I had 847 days of her 127,050 violations ready. Violations. What would you do if your HOA Karen weaponized police against charity work? Marcus Delacroix, 45, recently divorced electrician who'd moved back to his childhood home 6 months ago after his marriage fell apart. The 1960s ranch house on Maple Street came with painful memories, but also hope. His grandmother's place had always been his sanctuary. What he didn't know was that he was walking into a neighborhood war zone that had been raging for 2 solid years. The house sat on an oversized corner lot with a detached 3-car garage that still smelled like motor oil and forgotten dreams. You know that particular scent, WD-40 mixed with old leather and the ghost of Sunday afternoon projects. His late grandfather had been the neighborhood mechanic back when neighbors actually helped each other instead of measuring each other's grass with rulers. 3 months into his fresh start, Zachary discovered salvation through music. He'd picked up guitar during those lonely 2 a.m. divorce nights when sleep felt impossible, and when neighbor Danny Martinez mentioned he played drums, everything clicked. Add Sophia Bellamy from 2 streets over with her bass guitar, and suddenly, Second Voltage was born, named after Zachary's day job and their collective second chance at happiness. They practiced Saturdays 2 to 5 p.m., playing classic rock covers for local charity events. The garage was acoustically treated with moving blankets Zachary had installed himself, creating a sound barely louder than normal conversation. Definitely quieter than the leaf blower that jolted the entire neighborhood awake every Sunday at 7 a.m. sharp. Those first few weeks felt magical. Neighbors actually stopped by to listen. Mrs. Patterson brought lemonade in mismatched mason jars. Teenage Jake helped carry equipment with the enthusiasm only kids have for anything involving amplifiers. Even the mailman would pause to catch a few bars of Hotel California, his truck idling while Danny's drum beat echoed off garage walls. The smell of summer barbecues mixed with acoustic guitar melodies, creating the kind of community Zachary remembered from childhood. Their first charity gig raised $400 for the food bank. Their second brought in $600. By month 3, folding chairs appeared like magic whenever they opened those garage doors. But Zachary hadn't met the neighborhood's self-appointed dictator yet. Veronica Hartwell, 52, real estate agent and HOA president, had been terrorizing Maple Street residents for 2 solid years. She lived in the largest house on the block, a recent renovation funded by her husband's convenient insurance settlement, and treated the entire neighborhood like her personal fiefdom. Here's where it gets interesting. Veronica's reign of terror read like a suburban horror story. She'd forced out the Johnson family with bogus architectural violations after their teenage son's music was allegedly too loud. She'd fined single mom Lisa Rodriguez $400 for her kids' chalk drawings on their own driveway, artwork that washed away with the next rain. The woman measured grass heights with an actual ruler, photographed every perceived violation with CSI-level dedication, and timed sprinkler usage to the exact minute. That white Mercedes SUV with vanity plate HOA boss had become a symbol of suburban oppression, patrolling streets like a shark hunting for blood in subdivision waters. The first time Zachary saw her in action, he was tuning his guitar in the late afternoon sun. The sharp click of designer heels on asphalt cut through peaceful evening air like gunshots. Her expensive perfume hit him from 30 feet away, chemical and aggressive, nothing like the honeysuckle climbing his grandmother's fence. Her voice carried that particular pitch perfected by years of getting your way through pure volume. 2 months into Zachary's musical resurrection, the inevitable happened. Veronica appeared at his garage door with measuring tape, decibel meter, and the kind of clipboard that meant someone's weekend was about to get ruined. This commercial activity violates Section 12.3 of Community Standards, she announced without bothering with human pleasantries. Her manicured finger pointed at their modest setup like she was identifying a meth lab. What Zachary didn't realize yet was that the annual community safety fair was scheduled for this exact Saturday. Police, fire department, and city council members would be arriving in just hours. A timing coincidence that would turn Veronica's next move into the spectacular mistake that would end her HOA career forever. Veronica's first move was textbook psychological warfare, death by 1,000 paper cuts. The morning after she'd discovered our garage band practice, Zachary woke up to find 5 separate violation notices tucked under his windshield wipers like parking tickets from hell. Grass height exceeding 3.2 inches, recycling bin placed 6 hours early, garden gnome deemed architecturally inconsistent, vehicle parked 2 inches too close to his own property line, and the crown jewel, unauthorized gathering in his residential garage. Total damage, $375 for one Saturday afternoon of acoustic guitar. Marcus stood in his driveway holding the citations, feeling that familiar burn in his chest that meant someone was about to learn a very expensive lesson. The smell of fresh-cut grass filled the morning air, ironic, considering his grass was apparently a criminal enterprise. Mrs. Patterson's coffee pot gurgled next door, the sound of normalcy in a world gone completely insane. But here's what Veronica didn't understand about electricians. We read blueprints, property surveys, and municipal codes like other people read cereal boxes. 20 years of interpreting technical documents had taught Zachary that when someone weaponizes rules for sport, you better make damn sure your own house is bulletproof. And more importantly, you better check if theirs is. That afternoon found Zachary at the county clerk's office, a musty building that smelled like old paper and bureaucratic resignation. Helen, the tired clerk who'd witnessed every property dispute since Reagan was president, greeted him with a knowing smile. "Let me guess, Veronica Hartwell?" Helen pulled out a file drawer thick with complaints. "Honey, you're not her first victim, but you might be her last if you're smart about this." Buried in those yellowing documents, Zachary discovered something beautiful. His grandfather had built that garage in 1962. And the original HOA covenant from 1987 specifically protected pre-existing mechanical workshops and related activities on his exact lot. Zachary had been reading electrical codes since he was 16. Property law wasn't that different. The grandfathered clause meant every citation Veronica had written was legally worthless. But Zachary wasn't just another angry neighbor with a grudge. While researching his own property, he noticed something that made his electrician's brain light up like a circuit diagram. Veronica's pristine driveway, the one she was so proud of after her insurance-funded renovation, appeared to extend beyond her property line on the survey map. Marcus pulled his measuring tape from his truck, old habits from years of calculating electrical runs, 8.3 inches of concrete sitting on city property. He'd seen enough municipal code violations during permit inspections to know this was a big one. The city doesn't mess around with right-of-way encroachments. Snow plows, emergency vehicles, utility access all depend on those boundaries being clear. A quick check of the building permits showed the work finished 847 days ago. Municipal code was crystal clear, $150 per day until corrected. Zachary did the math twice, then a third time just to savor it. $127,050 in accumulated fines, plus removal costs, plus the delicious irony of watching someone who weaponized violations get buried under the biggest violation in town history. The next 3 days felt like Christmas morning stretched into a long weekend. Zachary documented everything with his phone camera, the shutter clicks sounding like ammunition being loaded. The concrete was definitely over the line, no question, no argument, no wiggle room for Veronica's usual intimidation tactics. Meanwhile, her harassment campaign intensified. Danny mentioned Veronica had suggested at the grocery store that he find more appropriate musical outlets. Sophia received a formal letter questioning whether her frequent visits violated guest parking restrictions. Classic bully behavior. Isolate the target by terrorizing their support system. But Zachary had learned something about bullies during his divorce proceedings. They're only powerful when you don't know the rules better than they do. On Thursday evening, he filed his formal appeal with the HOA board, citing grandfathered status and requesting a public hearing. He also slipped a quiet information request to the city planning department about potential right-of-way violations in the Maple Street area. The beautiful thing about bureaucracy is that once you file the right paperwork, the machine starts grinding whether Veronica likes it or not. Friday afternoon brought the perfect setup. Zachary was in his garage tuning his guitar when Veronica's Mercedes cruised past for the fourth time that day. Apparently, surveillance was her new hobby. Tomorrow was Saturday. Tomorrow was band practice. Tomorrow was also the community safety fair, which meant every cop, firefighter, and city official in town would be within 3 blocks when karma finally came knocking. The smell of approaching rain mixed with honeysuckle as Zachary checked his amplifier settings one last time. Storm clouds were gathering on multiple fronts, and Veronica had no idea she was standing in the worst possible place when lightning was about to strike. Veronica's second assault came with the precision of someone who'd clearly perfected this routine on previous victims. Monday morning, 7:15 a.m. sharp, just early enough to ruin Zachary's coffee but late enough to avoid her own noise ordinance violations, she struck with her nuclear option, the city building inspector. Marcus opened his garage to find a tired-looking man in a hard hat standing next to Veronica, who was practically bouncing on her designer heels with excitement. She'd managed to summon Carl Brennan, a 30-year veteran inspector whose weathered face suggested he'd rather be investigating actual problems instead of suburban drama. "Got a complaint about unlicensed repair operations," Carl said apologetically, clipboard in hand. The morning air carried the scent of fresh-cut grass mixed with Veronica's aggressive perfume, a combination that somehow smelled like trouble brewing. "Ma'am here says you're running a commercial auto shop without proper permits." Veronica gestured dramatically at Zachary's grandfather's vintage equipment like she was presenting evidence in a murder trial. "Look at that hydraulic lift, that electrical panel. This is clearly commercial-grade machinery being used for profit." Her voice had that particular pitch that suggested she'd practiced this speech in front of her bathroom mirror. Marcus watched Carl examine the garage with the weary professionalism of someone who'd seen every variety of neighbor warfare imaginable. His eyes lingered on the acoustic guitars, the folding chairs, Sophia's hand-painted Second Voltage charity concert banner hanging between tool cabinets. "Ma'am," Carl said slowly, running his hand over the vintage hydraulic system, "I'm seeing band equipment and some old tools. Where exactly is this auto repair business?" Here's where it got beautiful. While Veronica sputtered about obvious violations and industrial equipment, Carl was conducting the kind of thorough inspection that comes from 3 decades of separating real problems from neighborhood vendettas. He spent exactly 12 minutes documenting everything, took 3 photos, and handed Zachary a business card. "You'll get my report in 5 business days," Carl told Zachary quietly as Veronica continued her tirade. "But between us, I've inspected actual unlicensed shops. This ain't one of them. Just a guy with some family tools and a garage band." After they left, Zachary sat surrounded by his grandfather's legacy, feeling something fundamental shift inside him. Veronica wasn't just harassing him, she was weaponizing the memory of family against him, turning his inheritance into fictional evidence of crimes. That crossed the line from annoying neighbor to declared enemy. But here's the mini twist that would change everything. While Carl was conducting his official inspection, his trained eye had noticed something else entirely. During his 30-year career, he'd developed an instinct for spotting actual code violations, and Veronica's property was lighting up his mental warning system like a Christmas tree. The new driveway lacked proper drainage permits. The decorative lighting hadn't been inspected by electrical code enforcement. Those beautiful flower beds sat directly over the city's utility easement, about as legal as building a treehouse on power lines. And that concrete extension Zachary had measured? Carl's experienced eye confirmed it was definitely encroaching on municipal right-of-way. 3 days later, when Carl's report officially cleared Zachary of any commercial activity and confirmed his grandfathered workshop status, it came with an unexpected bonus. Carl had felt professionally obligated to pass along his observations about potential municipal code issues in the immediate area to the appropriate city departments. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting professionals do their jobs. Marcus celebrated by printing 3 copies of the clearance report, one for his files, one for the HOA board, and one for the neighborhood Facebook group that had become an unofficial support forum for Veronica's victims. Mrs. Patterson had started calling it the Underground Railroad for HOA refugees, which made Zachary laugh every time he thought about it. Thursday evening brought Veronica's desperate escalation. Professional sound testing equipment appeared in her driveway like she was preparing to document war crimes. Zachary watched through his garage window as technicians set up expensive microphones while Veronica directed them with the intensity of a film producer shooting her Oscar submission. The irony was delicious. While they prepared to measure the sound levels of acoustic guitars played at conversation volume, Zachary was quietly uploading Carl's observations, along with his own photos, to the city's online complaint portal. Each violation carried automatic fines, mandatory corrections, and the kind of bureaucratic scrutiny that transforms confident homeowners into nervous wrecks checking their mailbox with dread. Saturday was approaching fast, bringing with it the community safety fair that would position every relevant city official within walking distance of both their properties. As Zachary tuned his guitar and listened to actual thunder rumbling in the distance, he couldn't help but smile. Veronica had taught him something valuable about warfare. Sometimes the best strategy is just giving your enemy enough rope to hang herself with. Veronica's third move proved that when legal intimidation fails, some people double down on crazy. Friday morning brought her nuclear option, full-scale social media warfare designed to destroy Zachary's reputation before Saturday's charity concert. Marcus discovered the assault while drinking his morning coffee. Veronica had created a Facebook group called Concerned Willowbrook Residents and was posting dramatic videos of his garage like she was documenting war crimes. Illegal business destroying family neighborhood and daily noise violations threatening our children scrolled across footage that made acoustic guitars look like weapons of mass destruction. The smell of his coffee turned bitter as Zachary watched her amateur documentary work. She'd filmed his garage from multiple angles with breathless narration about industrial noise and constant disruption, complete with ominous background music that made Sweet Caroline sound like the soundtrack to suburban apocalypse. But here's where Veronica's plan backfired spectacularly. Within 2 hours, her own Facebook group had been completely hijacked by the very neighbors she was trying to rally. Mrs. Patterson led the counterattack with a video testimonial that went viral faster than cat memes. "That young man fixed my electrical panel for free during last month's storm and wouldn't take a penny," she declared, waving dismissively at the camera. "Meanwhile, this woman fined my grandson $50 for riding his bicycle on our own sidewalk." Sophia posted time-lapse videos of their charity concerts showing families bringing folding chairs while kids danced to gentle acoustic music. Danny shared audio recordings of their practice sessions. Guitars so quiet you could hear birds chirping and Mrs. Bellamy's wind chimes in the background. The Facebook group designed to destroy Zachary had become a community rally featuring testimonials that read like character references for neighborhood sainthood. Meanwhile, Zachary had been conducting his own investigation, and what he'd discovered was about to make Veronica's social media drama look like child's play. While she filmed conspiracy documentaries, Zachary had been digging through insurance claims and contractor receipts, guided by 20 years of experience spotting electrical code violations and fraudulent work orders. Veronica's insurance-funded renovation was a masterpiece of creative accounting. The claim listed $89,000 in storm damage, but actual contractor receipts showed $51,000 in legitimate work. The missing $38,000 had been allocated to mysterious landscaping and drainage improvements that existed only on paper. Marcus had encountered insurance fraud during his apprenticeship when a contractor tried billing phantom electrical work. Insurance companies investigate discrepancies like bloodhounds following a scent trail, and $38,000 worth of fictional landscaping would trigger the kind of investigation that ruins careers and sometimes involves handcuffs. But the mini twist that sealed Veronica's fate came from the most unexpected source, her own property maintenance records. While researching municipal permits, Zachary discovered that Veronica had filed complaints about her neighbor's landscaping, affecting drainage on her property. The irony was beautiful. She'd officially documented that her expensive drainage improvements weren't working, essentially admitting that the $38,000 insurance claim was either incompetent or fraudulent. Wednesday brought the sound of Veronica's world cracking apart. Zachary heard her screaming phone conversation through his open garage door, something about lawyers and frivolous city harassment and illegal investigations. The city had responded to multiple citizen complaints with the kind of thorough investigation that transforms confident homeowners into people who jump every time the doorbell rings. Thursday evening delivered the perfect preview of Saturday's chaos. Veronica had escalated to hiring private security to monitor Zachary's illegal activities, because apparently acoustic guitars now required armed surveillance. The guard, a tired-looking guy in an ill-fitting uniform, sat in his car outside Zachary's house with all the enthusiasm of someone being paid minimum wage to watch paint dry. Marcus waved cheerfully while carrying his guitar case, earning a confused wave back. The poor guy had no idea he was documenting charity work for hungry families. The irony was so thick it was practically edible. Veronica was spending more money on surveillance than Second Voltage had raised for the food bank. But Zachary's masterstroke was already in motion. While Veronica hired private investigators to watch him practice amazing grace, Zachary had filed his comprehensive complaint with city code enforcement. The complaint included photos, measurements, permit discrepancies, and insurance documentation that would be processed first thing Saturday morning. Perfect timing for the community safety fair. As Zachary checked his guitar tuning one final time, he could smell rain approaching on the evening breeze. The air felt electric with more than just approaching storms. Tomorrow would bring the convergence of every city official within 3 blocks of both their properties, and Veronica had systematically destroyed any credibility she might have had with her social media meltdown. The war had escalated beyond anything she could control, and Zachary held all the cards she didn't even know were in play. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that promised either triumph or disaster, and Zachary wasn't sure which side of that equation he'd land on. He was loading his guitar case when Mrs. Patterson appeared at his garage door, clutching her coffee mug and wearing the expression of someone bursting with secrets. "Marcus, honey, you need to know what's happening," she said, glancing around like they were discussing state secrets. "My friend Helen from the county clerk's office called me last night. The city opened 3 separate investigations yesterday, all involving our dear Veronica." The smell of Mrs. Patterson's vanilla coffee mixed with the morning scent of dew on concrete as Zachary set down his guitar case. "What kind of investigations?" "Insurance fraud, for starters." Mrs. Patterson's eyes sparkled with the satisfaction of someone who'd watched karma finally show up to work. Apparently someone, and Helen wouldn't say who, filed a complaint with documentation showing Veronica claimed $89,000 from insurance, but only did $51,000 worth of actual work. Marcus felt his electrician's brain calculating the implications. That missing $38,000 wasn't just creative accounting. It was felony fraud territory. "But wait, there's more," Mrs. Patterson continued, clearly enjoying her role as neighborhood intelligence officer. "The state real estate board got wind that she's been using HOA violations as marketing tools. Every citation she writes creates a 15% property value premium she can advertise to buyers." The pieces clicked together in Zachary's mind like a circuit diagram finally making sense. Veronica hadn't been enforcing rules. She'd been manufacturing violations to boost her real estate commissions. Every family she'd terrorized was essentially a marketing expense for her business. "Helen said that's a massive conflict of interest violation," Mrs. Patterson explained. "Board members can't profit from their enforcement actions. Every fine she's issued in 2 years could be thrown out." Marcus leaned against his workbench, surrounded by his grandfather's tools and the weight of revelation. Mrs. Patterson's information meant every neighbor Veronica had bullied, Lisa Rodriguez, the Johnson family, probably dozens of others, had been victimized by someone who was literally profiting from their misery. "When does this become public?" Zachary asked. Mrs. Patterson checked her watch with theatrical precision. "City Council's holding an emergency meeting this afternoon at 2 p.m. And get this, they're meeting at the Community Safety Fair Pavilion since all the officials will already be here." Through his garage door, Zachary could see early setup beginning 3 blocks away. Police cars, fire trucks, city vehicles positioning for the afternoon event that would bring every relevant authority figure within walking distance of both their properties. The timing was absolutely perfect. While Veronica had been playing social media warrior and hiring private security, the entire municipal system had been quietly building a case that would not only end her HOA dictatorship, but potentially send her to prison. Insurance fraud carried serious jail time. Real estate license violations meant career destruction. And all those illegal citations, every family she'd targeted would have grounds to sue her personally. Marcus thought about chalk drawings being fined $400, about bird feeders becoming violations, about his own garage being treated like a criminal enterprise. The scope of Veronica's systematic abuse was finally coming to light, but Zachary had one more card to play. While the city investigated insurance fraud and the state reviewed real estate violations, he still held documentation of her $127,050 municipal code violation. Perfect timing to add property line encroachment to her growing list of legal problems. As he picked up his guitar case and inhaled the approaching storm clouds, Zachary realized something beautiful. He hadn't just been defending his garage band, he'd accidentally exposed years of neighborhood corruption that was about to collapse in the most public way possible. In 4 hours, justice would be served with an audience of the entire community. Marcus spent the next 2 hours transforming his garage into the nerve center for the most satisfying neighborhood justice operation in Willowbrook Estates history. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with old motor oil as he spread documents across his grandfather's workbench. But this time, he wasn't just organizing evidence, he was setting a trap. The physical setup was crucial. Zachary positioned his sound equipment to face directly toward Veronica's property, ensuring that when the authorities arrived for their investigation, they'd have a perfect view of both his legal garage band setup and her illegal driveway extension. Sometimes the best evidence is what people can see with their own eyes. The beauty of property line violations lies in their brutal simplicity. Either your concrete ends where your property does, or it doesn't. Zachary had learned during electrical inspections that municipal boundaries exist for critical reasons. Snowplows need clearance, emergency vehicles require access, and utility crews must reach underground lines. When homeowners encroach on public right-of-way, they're not just breaking rules, they're creating genuine safety hazards that cities take very seriously. Danny arrived around 10 a.m. carrying his drumsticks and wearing the nervous grin of someone about to watch justice served hot. Mrs. Patterson told my wife about the investigations. Please tell me we're really doing this. Marcus handed him a manila folder thick with documentation. We're doing this, but first, help me set up the visual demonstration. They positioned Zachary's surveying equipment, borrowed from his electrical contractor friend, to mark the exact property boundaries. When city officials arrived, they'd be able to measure Veronica's encroachment in real time. Sophia appeared 20 minutes later, her bass guitar slung over her shoulder and Mrs. Patterson trailing behind like a general assembling her troops. The older woman carried a covered dish that smelled like cinnamon and righteous indignation. "Thought you might need sustenance for the battle," Mrs. Patterson announced, setting down cookies that somehow managed to smell like impending victory. "Besides, I've endured that woman's harassment for 2 years. I'm not missing the finale." The strategy session that followed was part military planning, part group therapy session. Sophia had compiled testimonials from 12 different families Veronica had terrorized, a documented pattern of abuse that would make any city council member uncomfortable. The stories shared a common theme: systematic targeting of working families, elderly residents, and single parents who couldn't afford legal challenges. Danny had researched the Community Safety Fair timeline and confirmed that Police Chief Martinez, Fire Marshal Thompson, and 3 city council members would arrive at 1:30 p.m. for the opening ceremony. Perfect timing for Zachary's presentation during the public comment period. "Here's our ace in the hole," Zachary explained, showing them photos of Veronica's driveway extension. While she's been measuring everyone else's grass with rulers, her own property has been illegally occupying city land for 847 days. The math is simple. $150 daily fine times 847 days equals $127,050 in accumulated violations. Mrs. Patterson's eyes sparkled with anticipation. "And she has no idea?" "She will in about 3 hours," Zachary replied, feeling the satisfaction of someone who'd spent months building an airtight case. Along with the insurance fraud investigation, real estate license review, and conflict of interest charges. The group spent the next hour rehearsing their coordinated presentation. Sophia would address the community impact of systematic HOA abuse. Mrs. Patterson would provide historical context about Veronica's 2-year reign of terror. Danny would present testimonials showing the pattern of targeting vulnerable families. Marcus would handle the technical demonstration, live measurements using surveying equipment that would make Veronica's violation undeniable in front of witnesses. 20 years of electrical inspections had taught him that the best evidence doesn't require interpretation. It simply exists. "Remember," Zachary emphasized as they organized their materials, "we're not seeking revenge. We're exposing abuse of authority to protect future families from experiencing what we've endured. As noon approached, storm clouds gathered both meteorologically and metaphorically. The community safety fair setup was reaching full intensity 3 blocks away, with official vehicles positioning like chess pieces for the afternoon's endgame. Zachary could taste the electricity in the humid air, perfect atmospheric drama for public revelations. His team dispersed to prepare for the confrontation, leaving Zachary alone in the garage surrounded by his grandfather's legacy and the evidence that would end a neighborhood dictator's career. The old tools seemed to approve silently, having witnessed decades of honest work in this space where justice was finally being assembled. Through his garage door, Zachary could see Veronica's house in the distance, her illegal driveway gleaming innocently in the pre-storm light. In 90 minutes, every relevant authority figure would gather within sight of that concrete evidence, and she'd discover that weaponizing harassment against neighbors was about to cost her everything. The trap wasn't just set, it was about to be sprung in front of the entire community. Veronica's final desperate gamble arrived at exactly the worst possible moment, 12:30 p.m., just as the community safety fair was reaching full setup mode 3 blocks away. Zachary was testing his guitar amp when he heard the distinctive screech of expensive tires, followed by the kind of car door slam that suggests someone has completely lost their grip on sanity. Through his garage window, Zachary watched Veronica storm up his driveway, clutching a legal briefcase like a weapon, and wearing the expression of someone who'd decided to burn down the village to save it. "Marcus Delacroix!" she shrieked, her voice cutting through the peaceful Saturday afternoon like a chainsaw through silk. "You are hereby served with an emergency restraining order. This harassment ends now." The smell of approaching storm mixed with her panic sweat as she thrust a manila envelope at him with shaking hands. Zachary accepted the papers with the steady calm of someone who'd been expecting exactly this move, though the timing was more desperate than he'd anticipated. Emergency injunction request. Filed at 11:15 a.m. Veronica was claiming Zachary had engaged in systematic stalking, property surveillance, and coordinated harassment, requiring immediate judicial intervention. She wanted a court order preventing him from attending any public community events, specifically today's safety fair. The legal strategy was actually brilliant in its desperation. No Zachary at safety fair meant no public presentation of evidence. No public presentation meant her violations might escape community scrutiny. No community scrutiny meant she might survive the insurance fraud investigation with her reputation intact. But Zachary had learned something about legal warfare during his divorce proceedings. Desperate people make critical mistakes when they're running out of time. "Interesting timing, Veronica," Zachary said, pulling out his phone to photograph the restraining order. "Filing emergency legal paperwork 2 hours before a community event you know I'm planning to attend. Almost like you're trying to silence public participation in civic proceedings." Veronica's triumphant smirk wavered slightly. "You've been stalking me, taking photographs of my property. That's criminal harassment." "Photographing municipal code violations from public sidewalks," Zachary corrected with electrical contractor precision. "Researching public records available to any citizen. Documenting systematic HOA abuse affecting multiple families. In legal terms, that's called civic engagement." Here's where Veronica's panic created the mini-twist that would destroy her case completely. In her desperate rush to file the restraining order, she'd included evidence of Zachary's alleged stalking, dozens of photographs she'd taken of his garage, his visitors, his daily activities, and his license plate numbers. Essentially, she'd just confessed in writing to conducting the exact surveillance behavior she was accusing Zachary of performing. Marcus couldn't suppress a small smile as he read through her filing. "Veronica, you've documented 47 photographs you took of my property as evidence that I'm stalking you. You hired private security to monitor my legal activities. You've called city departments weekly with complaints about my behavior. Who exactly is harassing whom here?" The realization hit Veronica's face like cold water. Her restraining order wasn't evidence of Zachary's harassment. It was a confession of her own stalking behavior, complete with photographic documentation and dates. "You can't do this to me," she screamed, her voice reaching frequencies that probably violated every noise ordinance she'd ever enforced. "I run this neighborhood. I decide what's acceptable." And there it was, the public confession that would play beautifully during this afternoon's proceedings. Zachary's phone had been recording since the moment she started shouting, capturing both her admission of authority abuse and her complete emotional meltdown. Actually, Veronica, you don't run anything, Zachary replied with the patient tone of someone explaining basic electricity to a confused customer. You're an elected volunteer on a homeowner's board. You serve the community, not the other way around. As Veronica retreated to her Mercedes, Zachary noticed the beautiful irony unfolding 3 blocks away. Police cars, fire trucks, and city official vehicles were positioning for the safety fair opening ceremony, creating the perfect audience for this afternoon's public accountability session. The emergency restraining order had backfired so completely that it actually strengthened Zachary's position. Instead of appearing like an angry neighbor seeking revenge, he now looked like a reasonable citizen defending himself against escalating harassment from someone with documented authority issues. Veronica's nuclear legal option had just become the evidence that would finish her HOA career. Storm clouds gathered overhead, matching the approaching tempest in Veronica's professional life. Zachary could smell rain mixing with the scent of fresh-cut grass from the safety fair setup, where every relevant authority figure in town was preparing for an afternoon that would become local legend. In exactly 60 minutes, the entire community would witness the spectacular conclusion to a neighborhood war that had escalated far beyond anything Veronica could control. The restraining order in Zachary's hand wasn't a threat, it was a confession that would make this afternoon's presentation absolutely devastating. Veronica's final act of desperation unfolded like a masterclass in self-destruction. At 1:00 p.m., exactly 30 minutes before the community safety fair opening ceremony, she deployed her nuclear option, a move so spectacularly stupid that Zachary almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The sound of sirens approaching from the wrong direction made Zachary look up from his guitar tuning. Not the expected fire trucks and police cars heading to the safety fair, but an ambulance racing toward Maple Street with emergency lights blazing. Through his garage door, Zachary watched paramedics pull into Veronica's driveway while she stood in her front yard wearing a neck brace and clutching her lower back like she'd been hit by a freight train. The performance was Academy Award worthy. Veronica limped dramatically toward the ambulance, her voice carrying across the neighborhood as she explained to the paramedics how Zachary's loud music and construction noise had caused her to fall down her front steps, resulting in serious spinal injuries that required immediate medical attention. But here's where Veronica's desperation created the most beautiful poetic justice Zachary had ever witnessed. While she was explaining her fictional injuries to increasingly skeptical paramedics, Danny's brother-in-law, Detective Ray Morrison, was pulling into Zachary's driveway, arriving for the pre-arranged meeting to discuss this afternoon's evidence presentation. Ray stepped out of his unmarked car, just in time to hear Veronica describing how Zachary's industrial noise levels had caused her debilitating fall at exactly 12:45 p.m., 15 minutes after Zachary had been standing in his own driveway, accepting her restraining order papers in complete silence. Interesting timing, Ray observed quietly, watching the ambulance scene unfold. She's claiming noise-induced injury during the exact time period when I was driving past your house. Funny thing, it was dead quiet. No music, no construction, no noise at all. Marcus felt puzzle pieces clicking into place as Ray continued. Also interesting that she's claiming spinal injury severe enough for emergency medical response, but she was walking normally when she served you those papers 30 minutes ago. I saw the whole thing from my car. The mini twist that sealed Veronica's fate was happening in real time. While she performed her medical emergency charade, Ray was documenting everything with his phone. Timestamps, witness observations, and the glaring inconsistencies between her claimed injuries and her actual physical capabilities. Detective Morrison, Zachary said carefully, would insurance fraud investigators be interested in someone who files false injury claims after their property insurance fraud gets exposed? Ray's cop smile was absolutely predatory. Hypothetically, someone with an open insurance fraud investigation who suddenly develops mysterious injuries requiring medical claims? That would suggest a pattern of fraudulent behavior that federal investigators find very compelling. But Veronica's medical theater was just the opening act. While paramedics reluctantly agreed to transport her for evaluation, clearly not buying her performance but legally required to respond, she was simultaneously posting live updates to her Concerned Willowbrook Residents Facebook group. Assault by neighbor, currently in ambulance after attack by garage band noise. Filing police charges immediately. Community safety fair must be canceled due to dangerous noise levels. The Facebook posts were time-stamped, geotagged, and completely contradicted by the peaceful Saturday afternoon silence that surrounded them. Zachary could hear birds chirping, Mrs. Bellamy's wind chimes, and the distant sound of safety fair setup, but no music, no construction, no noise of any kind. "She's creating evidence of her own perjury in real time," Ray observed with professional fascination. "These social media posts, combined with the false medical claims, combined with the fraudulent restraining order, she's building a federal case against herself." As the ambulance departed with Veronica still performing her injury pantomime, Zachary noticed something magical happening at the safety fair setup. Word of Veronica's medical emergency and assault accusations had reached the officials preparing for the ceremony, and they were responding with the kind of thorough investigation that suggested someone's credibility was about to be professionally evaluated. Police Chief Martinez arrived 15 minutes early to personally interview witnesses about the alleged assault. Fire Marshal Thompson wanted to discuss the dangerous noise levels that had supposedly caused injury. City council members were asking pointed questions about false emergency reports and their impact on city resources. Veronica's fake medical emergency had accidentally triggered the exact official scrutiny she'd been trying to avoid, bringing every authority figure directly to the scene of her violations 30 minutes ahead of schedule. "Marcus," Ray said, checking his watch, "in 20 minutes, every relevant law enforcement and city official will be gathered within sight of that illegal driveway, and now they're all personally invested in determining whether Veronica is a credible witness or a serial fabulist who wastes public resources." As storm clouds gathered overhead, Zachary plugged in his guitar for one final sound check. The approaching rain seemed appropriate for what was about to become either the most satisfying afternoon in Willowbrook Estates history or the most spectacular public humiliation ever witnessed at a community event. Based on the ambulance disappearing in the distance carrying Veronica's fictional injuries, Zachary was betting on the former. At 1:30 p.m. sharp, the community safety fair opened with the kind of perfect timing that suggested the universe had a sense of dramatic irony. Police Chief Martinez, Fire Marshal Thompson, 3 city council members, and half the neighborhood had gathered in the park pavilion just as the first raindrops began falling, creating the perfect indoor venue for the most explosive public accountability session in suburban history. Marcus walked into the pavilion carrying his guitar case and a folder thick with documentation, surrounded by Danny, Sophia, and Mrs. Patterson, who looked like a grandmother leading a revolution. The smell of fresh rain mixed with barbecue smoke from food vendors as nearly 100 neighbors took seats facing the small stage where officials were setting up microphones. Police Chief Martinez called for order, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to managing difficult situations. "Before we begin our planned safety presentations, we need to address some urgent community concerns that have come to our attention this afternoon." Marcus felt his electrician's steady hands as he approached the microphone, aware that every word would either vindicate 2 years of neighborhood suffering or destroy his own credibility forever. The sound system crackled to life as he began the presentation that would become local legend. "My name is Zachary Delacroix, and I want to talk about what happens when someone weaponizes authority against their neighbors." The pavilion fell silent, except for rain pattering on the roof as Zachary pulled out his measuring tape and photos. 2 hours ago, Veronica Hartwell filed an emergency restraining order claiming I was stalking her. 1 hour ago, she called an ambulance claiming my garage band caused her serious injury. 30 minutes ago, she posted on social media demanding this safety fair be canceled due to dangerous noise levels. Marcus gestured toward the peaceful afternoon around them. "As you can hear, there is no noise. There has been no music today. There was no assault. What there has been is a systematic campaign of harassment against multiple families in our neighborhood." Chief Martinez leaned forward with professional interest. "Mr. Delacroix, you mentioned documentation." The visual demonstration that followed was pure electrician precision. Zachary unfolded his measuring tape and walked to the pavilion's large windows overlooking Veronica's property. With Chief Martinez and Fire Marshal Thompson watching, he pointed out the exact location of her illegal driveway extension. 847 days ago, Veronica Hartwell completed a renovation that extends her concrete driveway 8.3 inches into city-owned right-of-way. Municipal Code 14.2.7 requires $150 daily fines until corrected. Zachary pulled out his phone calculator. $150 times 847 days equals $127,050 in accumulated violations. The crowd stirred as the implications sank in. Here was someone who'd been terrorizing neighbors over grass height while sitting on the biggest property violation in town history. But Zachary wasn't finished. While measuring everyone else's compliance with rulers, Veronica has been using HOA enforcement statistics to boost her real estate commissions by 15%. Every citation she's written directly benefits her business, a conflict of interest that invalidates 2 years of enforcement actions. City Councilman Rodriguez stood up, his face grave. Mr. Delacroix, are you alleging systematic abuse of municipal authority for personal profit? I'm presenting documented evidence, Zachary replied, handing over his comprehensive folder. Insurance fraud investigation opened yesterday, real estate license review in progress, right-of-way encroachment confirmed by photographic evidence, all while she's filing false police reports and fraudulent injury claims. The mic drop moment came when Mrs. Patterson took the microphone with the righteous fury of someone who'd endured 2 years of tyranny. This woman fined my grandson for riding his bicycle on our own sidewalk. She forced the Johnson family from their home over fictional violations. She's terrorized every working family, elderly resident, and single parent in this neighborhood while profiting from our misery. The pavilion erupted as neighbors began sharing their own stories. Lisa Rodriguez described $400 in fines for her children's chalk drawings. Jake's mother explained how basketball hoops became noise violations. Elderly Mr. Kim shared how bird feeders became unsanitary conditions. Chief Martinez raised his hand for silence. Based on what we've heard today, the city will be conducting comprehensive investigations into all HOA enforcement actions over the past 24 months. We'll also be reviewing emergency response protocols to prevent abuse of city resources. Fire Marshal Thompson added, the property line violation will be addressed immediately. Right-of-way encroachments affect emergency vehicle access. This is a serious public safety issue. As Zachary returned to his seat, rain began falling harder on the pavilion roof, creating the perfect soundtrack for justice being served. Through the windows, he could see Veronica's house in the distance, her illegal driveway now officially documented as evidence in multiple municipal investigations. The war was over. Veronica had destroyed herself so thoroughly that Zachary almost felt sorry for her. Almost. 6 months later, Zachary stood in his garage tuning his guitar while the sound of children's laughter drifted in from the street. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with the scent of Mrs. Patterson's famous cookies as neighbors gathered for Second Voltage's Saturday afternoon charity concert, now a beloved neighborhood tradition that had raised over $8,400 for the local food bank. Veronica Hartwell's reign of terror had ended with the kind of complete destruction that made Greek tragedies look understated. The emergency restraining order was dismissed within 24 hours, with the judge noting that her own evidence contradicted her claims. The fake injury lawsuit collapsed when security camera footage from 3 different angles showed her walking normally before and after her alleged spinal trauma. The insurance fraud conviction came first, 18 months in federal prison plus $47,000 in restitution for fictitious renovation claims. The real estate license revocation followed, ending her 20-year career in property sales. The HOA conflict of interest charges resulted in every citation she'd issued being declared invalid, triggering an avalanche of lawsuits from families seeking damages for wrongful harassment. But the $127,050 municipal violation was Zachary's personal favorite. The city had demanded immediate removal of her illegal driveway extension, plus accumulated fines, plus legal costs for forcing municipal action. Veronica's pristine concrete monument to suburban oppression was jackhammered into rubble on a Tuesday morning while the entire neighborhood watched from lawn chairs. The house went on the market 3 weeks later, selling for $89,000 below asking price after word spread about the legal troubles. Veronica moved to a small apartment across town where she couldn't measure anyone's grass or fine children for playing basketball. Marcus had transformed the neighborhood in ways that went far beyond ending one woman's dictatorship. The garage band concerts had evolved into monthly community gatherings featuring rotating local musicians, potluck dinners, and fundraising for various causes. Mrs. Patterson organized a neighborhood watch program that focused on helping elderly residents rather than citing violations. Sophia started a community garden where Veronica's surveillance cameras used to monitor property lines. The Second Voltage Music Scholarship had grown into a $12,000 annual fund supporting underprivileged kids throughout the city. 18 students had received instruments and lessons, creating a pipeline of young musicians who regularly performed at community events. Danny had quit his day job to teach drums full-time, turning his passion into a career that served the community. Marcus found personal healing through the experience in ways he hadn't expected. The garage that had once represented his grandfather's legacy now symbolized his own ability to stand up for what was right. The divorce that had driven him back to his childhood home had ultimately led him to discover a community worth fighting for. The legal victory had attracted national attention, with Zachary appearing on 3 different podcasts about HOA reform and neighborhood organizing. The story had inspired similar resistance movements in 12 different states, proving that documented evidence and persistent community organizing could defeat even the most entrenched suburban tyrants. But the real transformation was visible every Saturday afternoon when families gathered in his garage for music, food, and the kind of genuine community that Veronica had tried so hard to destroy. Children who'd been fined for chalk drawings now performed on makeshift stages. Parents who'd been terrorized over mailbox placement now organized charity drives and block parties. The garage itself had become a symbol of resistance throughout the region, with visitors stopping by to see the place where one electrician had taken down an entire corrupt HOA system using nothing but documentation, persistence, and the power of community solidarity. As Zachary plugged in his amplifier for another afternoon of music and neighbors, he reflected on what he'd learned about the nature of suburban power. Bullies only succeeded when good people stayed silent and isolated. When the community organized around shared values of fairness and mutual support, even the most entrenched authority couldn't survive public accountability. The sound of tuning guitars mixed with the chatter of neighbors setting up folding chairs as storm clouds gathered on the horizon, promising afternoon rain that would send everyone into the garage for an intimate acoustic session. Marcus smiled, remembering Veronica's prediction that garage band practice would destroy the neighborhood. She'd been right in one sense. It had destroyed her version of the neighborhood, replacing fear and harassment with music, community, and the radical idea that neighbors should actually like each other.